right, welcome to Mental Health Ministry. Want to thank everybody for joining us today as we go into part two of the impact of bitterness on mental health. Ask that everybody who's watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you can go ahead and share this post, and if you'd like to join us on the Zoom platform, pinned to the top of the comments, you'll see a Zoom link. Just click that link, and you can join us on the Zoom platform. But again, ask that you share the link. And now I put it in the hands of the coordinator of our mental health ministry, Brother John Parker.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing great.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, last week or last month, we were talking about the impact of bitterness and mental health, and we got about halfway through. And I wanted to kind of finish up what we were talking about, but I didn't want to kind of rush through it. So I think just taking this time to kind of do the second part will be good for us. And so what I want to do in terms of recapping some of the conversation. Um, if you want to, Pastor Ross, slide to the slide, I think it's maybe number 6 that has the video, the short video on, yeah, that one there. We'll kind of start here and just as a refresher on bitterness.
If you've ever found yourself feeling angry and bitter about something that someone did or didn't do, and struggling to let go of your hurt and anger, then you'll know just how much resentment can slowly eat away at your soul. Resentment can subtly take control of your thoughts, leading you down a path of constant anger and bitterness like that cranky old lady in Gremlins. But what if I told you that letting go of resentment could be the key to not just peace of mind, but also to better mental health? Today I'm sharing how to let go of resentment and anger. So let's talk. Hi, I'm Jeremy Godwin, writer and mental health counsellor, and I used to be a world champion at holding grudges. But over the past few years, I finally learned to let go more and to make my own peace of mind a priority. After all, nobody can give you peace of mind but yourself. A big part of that mindset shift involves learning how to let go of resentment so you're not carrying around anger or bitterness. So what is resentment? Resentment is a complex emotion that arises when we feel wronged or like we've been mistreated. In terms of mental health, resentment can be a bit like a toxin that seeps into our well-being, slowly poisoning our outlook on life and our interactions with others. It's not just about feeling angry, it's an ongoing grudge that can consume us. Why is overcoming resentment important? It's important for lots of reasons, but the main one is this. If you let resentment fester, it tends to grow and eat away at your soul. And before you know it, you're angry at everyone and everything, which is basically the opposite of peace of mind, just FYI. Left unchecked, resentment can also lead to a host of mental health issues like chronic stress, depression, and a general decrease in life satisfaction. It can trap you in a cycle of negativity, affecting your relationships, your work, and your overall outlook on life. So let's talk about how to overcome anger and bitterness. Tip 1. Acknowledge your feelings. You can't begin to address resentment without first admitting it's there and accepting it. This might sound simple, but it's often the hardest step. Acknowledging your feelings isn't just about justifying them. It's about understanding them. This first step is crucial because it allows you to start processing those emotions in a healthy way in order to find acceptance. Tip 2. Focus on what you can control. Resentment often comes from a place of feeling powerless, but you're not. You're always in control of what you choose to do and say. Redirect your energy towards what you can control. Your reactions, your mindset, and your actions. This shift in focus empowers you, reducing feelings of helplessness that fuel resentment. Tip 3. Focus on solutions. Focusing on problems is easy to do, but it doesn't serve any practical purpose other than to keep you stuck in problem mode. What you look for is what you will find. So start turning your focus towards possible solutions instead. Ask yourself, what can be done to resolve this issue? This proactive approach shifts your focus from stewing in negative emotions to actively seeking solutions, which can alleviate feelings of anger and bitterness. Tip 4. Reframe your thoughts. Challenge yourself and change how you think about the situation that caused resentment. For example, instead of thinking, this always happens to me, try thinking, this was an unfortunate incident, but I can cope and move on. Reframing your thoughts can alter your emotional response to them and also help you to see the situation as a learning opportunity instead of a catastrophe or injustice. Tip 5. Create a letting go ritual. The act of letting go can be incredibly freeing, and rituals can provide a sense of closure and help you to process your emotions and release resentment. You could do something symbolic, like writing down your resentful thoughts on paper and then tearing it up or burning it. Safely, please. Here's the thing. Carrying around resentment means being weighed down by a heavy burden that serves no useful purpose. All it does is make you feel worse about yourself. Free yourself from the chains of your past hurts and disappointments, and focus instead on taking steps towards a lighter, freer, happier life. You've got this.
Okay. Any comments, questions, concerns about what we just saw? It could be controversial if you didn't believe anything he said or hated it at all. I'm more than happy to talk about that too.
Not necessarily, but I took notes.
Okay.
Sound like somebody about
I,
to say
I
something.
think I have a controversial thing towards it.
Okay.
So I think everything he said is great, and I think it's super helpful. But
Mhm.
one thing I will say is I was struggling with bitterness, and man, I was doing all the things he talked about, but it
Mhm.
just wasn't working. And
Mhm.
I needed some spiritual deliverance. And then when I got the spiritual deliverance, um, that actually like fully took me to like not kind of like a temporary thing, but like true freedom. So I don't necessarily disagree with what he said, but I think sometimes people could do all the things, create the rituals, take the deep breath, work on it, and still, have maybe this just deep hurt and bitterness that like is just really hard to let go of, and they might need a little bit more of some spiritual help in addition to all the natural things, which I think we all should know.
And I don't disagree with that. We'll towards the end we'll have some scriptures and thing that kind of talks about bitterness and God's instructions to us towards bitterness um and yeah, and revenge and all that type of stuff. And so yeah, I don't disagree at all. And I think some stuff I mean, a lot of people that are Christians, I think it's an easy slam dunk to be like, oh, let's make sure we don't forget about God. And I think that's the highest that we should achieve and try to figure out how do we incorporate spiritual practices into any healing that we do. But sometimes people will pray it away and don't do the things on a daily basis to not be in that situation. So you can like it's almost like people go to the altar, pray, leave and feel better, but then they take that thing back with them to their seat. You know what I mean? They don't leave it there. And so I think the spiritual stuff is definitely what we need to do for like the daily digging deep, asking the Lord to heal us, figuring out what may be underlying all the things we have going on, but we still have to do the day to day things. So I think uh, neither perspective is wrong. I think it's a both and. So you do the things that we're talking about, or what he was talking about, as a way to have a checks and balance for your daily life and what you do. And then also you take scripture along with you. You take the prayer and supplication. You take the fasting. Do all the things spiritually because there's definitely a place for that too. So I agree with you 100%. All right. So on if there's nothing else for that, so when we're talking about breaking free from bitterness, so last week we kind of talked about what bitterness is, how it develops, the physical health consequences, the mental health consequences, and so I wanted to make sure that we spend a little bit of time thinking about breaking free from the bitterness, from the just the hurt, the wounds, the pain. And so again, on the natural side of things, there's something we call cognitive behavioral strategies. And one of those things that I have highlighted here is reframing negative thoughts. And so sometimes when we are bitter about something, or somebody's done something to make us feel a certain way, or something happens over and over again, and we always have the same outcome in terms of our feelings, oftentimes one thing that works is reframing how the situation has happened. And so one of the things we can do is figure out, hey, when I'm feeling bitter about something or something that's made me bitter, is my bitterness based in assumptions or is it based in facts? Right. And so with that situation, it's kind of often you hear people say facts versus feeling. And so if there's a situation where I say I do something to Reverend Rawls, I say something that he didn't like. I could have meant no harm by it, but it made him feel a certain way, and he was offended by it, and so he can be offended and go on about his business, not say nothing to me, and hold a grudge against me and be bitter, or he can make sure that what I said is what I meant. And so that's the difference between assuming my intent and actually knowing. And if I meant to offend him, then that's a bigger issue and we can have that conversation. But if the assumption is, oh, what John said was hurtful, and if I said what I said and it was hurtful, then I can apologize and all that type of stuff. But if I don't have that conversation with Reverend Rawls and he doesn't let me know that what I said was offensive and he's bitter about it, he's going to be moving in that bitterness, and he's the only person that's going to be affected by it because I have no idea that I offended, right? And so we need to always um, face those assumptions, understand what's going on, make sure we have the facts about the situation so that we can properly assess what the situation is and not have to walk in that bitterness. Any comments there? All right. And another idea with the reframing the experience, if you feel like you were wronged, um, there's a way in which you can say, hey, you know what? I face a difficult situation, but I can grow from it. So instead of having the perspective, I was wronged, I was wronged, I was wrong, these people always do this, the job always does that, da, 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 da. It's like, all right, well, I didn't like how that situation went, but what do I learn from that? How do I grow from that? How would I turn this experience into something that's positive, so that I can not be in this space of bitterness, so that I don't have to feel, the need to exact revenge. And so that's the next part. And we were talking about that last week. That throughout this process of even preparing for this, the Lord was even dealing with me on the idea of justice and what I felt justice is, and how justice should be doled out to people when they do me wrong. And God reminded me that His idea of justice is not the same idea of justice for me. And for me, justice also usually hand in hand with revenge. And so when we're moving in the space of bitterness that keeps us in this place of seeking revenge, we hold on to that anger and it only affects us. It only hurts me. It only makes me more, just susceptible to anger, to flying off the handle, to being bitter. And that need for revenge is just a part of the cycle that has to break free in order for us to be free from bitterness. And so, again, as Kiara was saying, the spiritual part was like, hey, God was telling me, like, hey, man, you're going about trying to solve your problems and rectify wrongs in the wrong way. And it's not going to be beneficial for you to continue in that mode. And so the practical side was like, all right, well, Lord, how do I understand that? One, this need for revenge needs to go. How do I understand that revenge only hurts me? And then how do I reframe my experiences so that when something pops up that could, you know, grow a root of bitterness in me, how do I understand that, hey, let's nip that in the bud immediately, as soon as possible, and reframe the situation or get the facts of the situation, so that I can deal with it appropriately. Any questions there?
I I guess I need to go back in the beginning.
Mhm.
How do we define bitterness?
Let me see. We did bitterness, a persistent feeling of resentment, anger, or disappointment.
Okay, okay,
That
that
was on the
helps.
second slide.
Okay,
The first slide.
so that
Mhm,
helps because I can cut people off and not be
mhm,
bitter. I I can look at the way
mhm,
that somebody dealt with something. I can cut them off, but have no kind of feelings towards it. Kind of just move on.
mhm,
And so I see those are two different
mhm.
things. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, yeah, and 100%. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes cutting people off is a form of self-care. Sometimes you just don't need certain people in your circles, and it's best that you kind of move on from those situations. But again, yeah, the idea of bitterness is a persistent feeling of resentment, anger, or disappointment. So you can have a one-time experience or a one-time thing kind of pop up and kind of rub you the wrong way, and you move on from that. But if it's something that's like we talked about the plant and the seed growing a root, and that root becoming a tap root, and that being a thing that just tears up your driveway and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's kind of how we want to look at bitterness, as a ongoing thing that has a seed. That seed gets planted, it develops roots, and it becomes a tree in your life, or a bush, or something that bears fruit thereof.
Like a
Mhm,
bitter person in my mind is like that person where every time you talk to them, they keep talking about that same problem. Like they
mhm,
just, or that person who hurt them about 20
mhm,
years ago and they
mhm,
still talking about it. That to
Mm-hmm.
me, I guess that would be bitter, like that, just that same problem, and it's like never a solution, and they just keep holding on to it.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And it's funny because it can be the same problem with different people, and then that person never recognizes that they're the like the common denominator and all these different things. Like they keep having the same problem, person after person after person after person with this same thing, but not recognizing that how they're processing the situation, how they're viewing the situation, how they handle conflict or whatever it looks like, is what leads to their bitterness. And it's like a cancer. It's something that just spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads. And it could mess your life up, both spiritually and physically. We talked about that. And I think the next thing on the role of forgiveness for yourself and others, it does not mean excusing the wrong or forgetting the hurt. It just means releasing yourself from the emotional burden. And so I know we have this idea, it's like, oh, forgive and forget and all that. And so for some people, they're able to do that. But forgiveness, and I guess we can balance this with scripture. And Reverend Ron, feel free to jump in if I'm leading us down the wrong path. But I think part of forgiveness is understanding that this thing happened, processing this thing and how it made you feel, being real with yourself and saying, yeah, that really hurt, and not just washing it under the rug or say I'll throw it into the sea of forgetfulness or I'll do whatever, but really processing and spending the time to understand how that situation made you feel, or makes you feel when it happens over and over again. But then going through this proper process of releasing that pain, releasing that hurt, letting go of that bitterness. And I think sometimes for some people it may come from forgetting, like, but if we're pretending that we forget and that sting and that wound and that bitterness is still there, I think that's one thing that doesn't do us any good. And I think a lot of times people will pretend like they've moved on, or they'll pretend like everything is all good, or for the sake of not being in conflict, or for the sake of being the bigger person, better person, they'll give off the appearance of having let go or forgiven, but they haven't really dealt with it or really haven't forgotten. And I think that's more the problem. Like, hey, if you're gonna forgive. If you're gonna move on, but don't pretend and don't act like it didn't hurt and don't act like it didn't have some kind of consequence on you, because that doesn't help with the healing process, and that doesn't help with you moving forward. Um, and just on the physical health side, research shows that forgiveness can lead to reduced stress, lower pressure, lower blood pressure, and overall improved mental well-being. So the act of forgiveness is again a biblical directive, but it also does our body well and it does our mind well when you actually walk in that. Um, any questions there?
Yeah, I think that that even lines up with scripture in Ecclesiastes 12 and 14. It says, God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. And so he forgives us, but at judgment, those things will be listed in our.
You muted. You muted.
I'm sorry. And so
Uh-huh.
he will forgive us. But it does say that when we have to stand at the judgment seat, those things will be a part of our record. And so we're forgiven for it, but they're still there. And so when we think about throwing in the sea of forgetfulness and all that kind of stuff like that, we got to understand that those things are still attached to us. They've just been forgiven, but they are. The scripture does say that He's going to judge us for everything that we do in the body, whether good or bad. And so when I'm
Amen.
talking about, and so when I forgive somebody, the pain and the punishment that I would like to exact upon them, that's gone. The emotions are gone. But I just don't necessarily forget it. I do remember it, but that the emotions don't come with it anymore.
Yeah. And there's actually a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And that book talks about kind of what you're saying, that on a physical health level, for our bodies and even for our mental health, our bodies remember trauma, our bodies remember drama, our bodies remember things that could lead to bitterness. And if we don't practice ways in which to deal with that, our bodies will remember it, and it leads to all kind of physical problems and all kind of mental health problems. And so, like you're saying, like, hey, like, we remember, and it's fine to remember, but we have to put in the work to make sure that we um, can manage that in a way that it doesn't affect us in a mental health way or in a physical health way. So it's It's a real problem. And oftentimes, again, my biggest issue if I'm driving home is like we cannot pretend like everything is okay when it's not okay. We got to deal with it as much as it may hurt. We might have to give it its proper time. We maybe don't deal with it right in that moment because it does take a lot of processing. Like to process something, the actual part of like, hey, let's sit here and think about what happened. Let's have a conversation. Talk to a therapist, my pastor, my friend, whatever, mom, dad, like that. It's work. And sometimes we're too busy, or sometimes we make excuses not to do it. But if we don't do it over time, it's just gonna backfire on us. And so we have to actually practice that forgiveness. And again, even if we think we've forgotten and we haven't dealt with it, our body will keep the score, and our body will remember it, and it will have long term consequences for that. Does that make sense? Did I explain the body keep the score part? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so for some of the practical coping mechanisms, what we call ways in which to manage bitterness in a way to deal with the forgiveness part, the forgetting part, the moving on, dealing with the self work. So we have things like mindfulness and meditation. Prayer, I mean, is pretty much the same idea. Um, but with mindfulness and meditation, you might add deep breathing techniques. You might do other things to help you calm down. You might go out in nature. You might go for a walk, but you're really being present with your thoughts, with your breathing, what you got going on as a way to kind of break the any tension that may be in your body or any stress you may be feeling or whatever the case may be. And it's a technique that we teach. Journaling, pretty simple. You write about your feelings to process and release negative emotions. Like the gentleman was saying in the video, there is a technique where you write the issue down on a piece of paper, you ball up that piece of paper, you throw it away, you throw it in the trash can, burn it, whatever the case may be. It's a symbolic thing. It's not there's no magic to it. But it's just one of those things where it's like letting go, letting God, woosah, all those type of things where you write it down, process it, let it go, and you don't return to that thing. And then in general therapy and counseling, and then acts of kindness, like sometimes doing things positive for others can help shift the focus away from bitterness. I hear a lot of times people will say like, hey, I was feeling a certain way, was upset about things. But when I started practicing kindness, when I started doing acts of service for others, when I started to think about things outside of myself and do for those outside of me, it helped. And I think that's something that we don't do enough of. And that those things can kind of help offset build bitterness. And then lastly, social support. So social support is basically having a group of people or a person that you kind of confide in. They're your accountability. They're all those things. So they can be a sort of a source of support that can encourage you and help you with your emotional healing. It can be a support group, can be a faith-based community group, but the idea there is that you're processing those emotions and really spending the time to spend time with others to kind of help you through the situation. And be wise. You can't tell everybody everything, and you got to know who you're dealing with. Have some discernment there. But social support is very important when you're trying to break free from bitterness. Any questions there? All right. So I wanted to get this case study going. And I'll give you maybe 30 seconds or so to read the scenario, and then I'll read it out loud. And then we'll just ask questions.
All right.
Okay, so I'll read the scenario. Sarah was unfairly passed over for a promotion and felt deep resentment towards her employer. Over time, she became withdrawn, constantly replaying the injustice in her mind. Her bitterness led to insomnia, anxiety, and strained relationships at work and home. So we got questions. Feel free to anybody chime in. And the first question is, how did bitterness affect Sarah's mental and emotional health based on a scenario?
It says that she
Well,
became she became withdrawn,
Mm-hmm.
and just her mind started just really start. She was focusing. I guess the thing that one thing that was said earlier that was for us to focus on solutions. Um, and she seemed like she just was really replaying the injustice in her mind as opposed to addressing the injustice or
Mm-hmm.
finding a solution for the injustice. Couldn't sleep, anxiety, and I guess that leads to sickness and all that kind of stuff, and even affect her relationships at work and at home.
Yeah. I think I heard somebody else going to say something, or did that cover what you were saying?
Yeah, that covered what I was gonna say, but this made me think about that book Love and Respect I read, and it talks about like the crazy cycle. So this doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exactly mention it, but I would imagine like the relationships that were strained at home led to more bitterness. You know, the like just her life, quality of life going down probably led to more bitterness. So it seemed like it like be it could potentially become like this ongoing cycle that now it's like she looks at life through like this bitter perspective. And so it's not in that situation, but it seeps into like every situation to where it's like something happened, but the way she saw it was like so bitter because she was like living life through this lens of bitterness.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree 100%. And again, it's this idea of like constantly replaying the injustice in our mind. I think we are our own worst enemies when it comes to this idea of this bitterness and how it sets in. So you know there's ways in which we have to handle things and process things so that we're not in our own head, for the lack of a better term. It's a common term that people use. And so when she's replaying this injustice in her mind, that's not helping her. It doesn't say she was having conversations with people to understand, like, hey, how did she get passed over? She didn't have a conversation with, or, other coworkers, or maybe have a sit down with her supervisor. I don't know if those things, you know, based on what we have here, if she can have those conversations, and kind of like not be upset or fussy or, yell at her employer or whatever the case may be. But there's ways in which I think she could have had conversations with people, even on her, in her work environment, to kind of get a better understanding of how she could have maybe got promoted the next time, or, whatever. And I give you an example from my own life. Uh, I was working for a record company, a record label, and I was the lead engineer, and I worked on an album that later got nominated for a Grammy or whatever the case may be. So the quality of the album was good. I can't say how much of my job affected that, but one day I got a phone call and someone was asking me how could I help them figure out some things that were going on in the recording studio. And I was thinking to myself, I initially started helping them, like, oh, do this, flip this switch, do this, do that, do that. And then I began to wonder, like, hey, like, why am I not there? Like, what are you recording? What's going on? Why am I not the person that's there doing the work? And then come to find out that I was pretty much training the person that was replacing me, but I didn't know that they were replacing me. And nobody even ever had the conversation with me telling me that I was fired or lost my job or I was no longer that person or whatever. And so for me, instead of saying, hey, you know what? All right, well, I still want to be a part of the label. I still want to learn if this person is better than I am, even though nobody's telling me that. I probably could have just said, hey, let me just come on in an intern role and figure out, how to better my skills. But instead, I got bitter about the situation, threw my hands up, gave my keys, turned my keys in, my fob, all that type of stuff, and never had conversation with the folks again about the situation. And so for me, I missed out on the opportunity, one, to continue in that line of work, to get more skills, especially to learn from the person that was replacing me. And then it also, just kind of, I didn't really burn any bridges, but I think there was a little bit of bitterness and resentment on my behalf for a little while because, again, nobody explained to me what was going on. But I could have took that in my own hands and had conversations and really got to the bottom of things in not an angry way or frustrated way, just really just from a place of like, hey, man, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what happened. Nobody told me that I got fired. I just was getting replaced and there was no conversation. And so, things work out how they work out and I moved on and I'm in the line of work I'm in now. But I feel like for me, when I look back on those times, I just kind of kicked myself because there was probably an opportunity for me to continue in that line of work, or especially with that record company. But, because of my feelings about the situation, I kind of played myself. And again, maybe it was the Lord, but, I feel like I could have handled that. And that was part of it for me, just thinking about the situation and then over and over and over again being like, man, I can't believe they did this. Man, I can't believe they did this. I did my all. I was up at night. We was doing all, 40-hour shifts trying to get music done. We was doing this, doing that. How could they let me go? And it didn't make anything better. And I should have just had the conversation. And so that leads us to the second question. If there's no more ideas on how it affected Sarah's mental health and emotional health, um, what strategies could Sarah use to break free from bitterness? Now I know, we haven't talked about a lot of what we did in the previous session, but maybe from what you heard in the video or your own thoughts about things, maybe what we talked about in the previous slide, what do you think there's some strategies that Sarah could use to break free from bitterness in this situation or maybe in her life totally? No wrong
I
answers, I don't think.
I think she could
So I
have
think,
definitely go ahead, Kira.
oh, I was gonna say, I think Sarah can go to therapy
Mm-hmm.
and um get an outside perspective on her situation that would
Mm-hmm.
empower her to make some decisions, whether it be, applying for a new job or having a conversation with management or and just begin. Alexa, stop. And just begin correct, like just making improvements, like making progress, so she won't feel like a victim, but instead she can take charge of her life and then feel good about just knowing that at the end of the day she gets to make the decisions after seeing how things go.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And I think because it seems like she really wanted the promotion, and so I
Mm-hmm.
think that would have been a good opportunity to have a conversation with the employer to find out what is it that they were looking for. And then from that they would have known that she has an interest in advancing also. But then she could also kind of get a better idea, what is it that I can do, to put myself in a position for more consideration, the next time an opportunity comes up. And so, going having that opportunity with the employer to get some clarification on what they were looking for, I think could have been helpful too.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. That reminds me of a term that they use nowadays called crashing out. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. But the idea of crashing out is just that that you in the face of opposition or when something happens that you don't like, you you just go all in, cuss everybody out, throw stuff around, fire yourself at the job, and so people crash out behind stuff like this. But I think Reverend Ross, one thing that I think may be missing from, I don't know if it's a generational thing or whatever the case may be. I feel like there was a time in which you learned that, hey, in order to get a position higher than the position that you have now, you do want to ask people what skills do you need to learn? How do you be better at your job? How do you fit the role of that position in order to get that position? And I don't want to get sidetracked, but I think that's missing in a lot of our conversations, especially with young folks. It's like, hey, like there's a way in which you can climb the ladder, and if you're not learning how to do that job that's ahead of yours or above yours, or be a supervisor, whatever the case may be, um, you're not going to be in line for that job. And so I think that's part of the next conversation is like, all right, even life coaching, there's a sub category of therapy that's like life coaching. And so oftentimes people will come to me for life coaching when they're trying to figure out like, hey, I got this thing I'm trying to do. There's this way in which I want to approach it, but it's probably not the best idea, or maybe it's a good idea. I don't know. And I just need somebody to help me think through it. And so with life coaching, as it may be a little cheaper sometimes too than therapy, but it just may be a specific thing where, Sarah could go to a life coach and be like, hey, uh, I'm trying to figure out what went wrong. I don't know if it's a personality issue. I don't know if it's something I'm doing at work. Can you help me kind of sort through things to see how I can, um, one, approach my employer about this job position that I didn't get, or figure out what I'm doing as an employee. Maybe it's maybe whatever. They'll maybe help you figure out. Maybe you stay your break too long, or you come in to work too late. There's maybe little things that they can help you think through that might be affecting your job performance that you're not thinking about. And so that's I think one way in which she can approach that. But I think another thing too that's free, that we don't often utilize enough, is speaking to someone that's known you for a very long time and ask to get perspective on, hey, I didn't get this job. I'm not sure why I didn't get this promotion. But is there things about me that you see or things that you know of from my work habits or my work ethic that would potentially prevent me from moving forward in my position or moving forward in my job? And so it's not directly stated in this scenario, but I think things like that, where we get information, again, with the social support, like we were talking before, having people that know you, that can speak to your character, that can speak to your work ethic, having conversations with those people, I think really works in situations like this and in other situations too. But It helps to have that. Sometimes your mom, your auntie, your uncle, somebody, they can be kind of objective, or they're not able to be objective in situations, but you still, want to have those conversations with people so they can help you figure out where you may be missing it or where you may not be able to see things because you have blinders on.
I had a suggestion too, if possible.
Yes. Hmm.
I was gonna say a strategy that Sarah could also have used. I think it is good to get like what you just said, like feedback from people around you, because they can tell you like, I don't know, like, oh man, you did the best you could, and they whack for not giving you that promotion. Or they could be like, I guess you have to have really good friends that may also tell you that, sometimes you be slacking. But I was gonna say also I think um talking to God about it as well. Because, and I guess also working on those skills, because then it's like, okay, am I supposed to stay here or am I supposed to go? So if you've been working on those skills, maybe you're also like a really good candidate for another position that you could easily go to and be like, all right, well, I've been working on my skills, so this is not for me and I'm on
Just
to the next
updated went off
thing.
the
Or it
printer.
could be that maybe you are supposed to stay and wait and God might have you there for a season. But I think that sometimes having like a piece about like God's overall plan also helps battle like especially the thoughts you have, especially if it's been like somebody's done something wrong to you and you've actually done like good work.
I agree. I agree 100%. And I think that's part of, again, what Kiera was saying before. Sometimes we take the natural routes, and sometimes it's a spiritual route that needs to be taken so that we can understand the situation that we're facing, and how we can take it to God and really understand that, hey, again, if that uh, promotion wasn't for me, is there one for me? Do I need to stay in this role a little bit longer? Is it something else you'd have me do, or is it time to move on to a different employer? But I agree with that 100% as well. Any other questions? Any other comments on that? Okay, we can do one more case study. And again, with this one, I'll give you all 30 seconds or so to read it, and then I'll read it again, and then we'll jump into the questions. And so the next one should be James. Yep. Okay, I'll give you some to give y'all some time to read it. All right. So James had a falling out with his father over financial matters and refused to speak to him for years. This bitterness made James emotionally closed off, impacting his marriage and friendships. He also developed chronic stress related health issues. Based on the scenario here, how did James's bitterness impact his life?
And in some of the same ways that it affected the other lady, just stress again, chronic stress, which affected his health. And then he was closed off. I guess that was a real important relationship that was critical in his life. Now I won't say critical, but that was important for his life, and he cut that off. But he couldn't just walk away from it, and so it affected other relationships, including his marriage, and just health stuff that stress stuff that affected his health.
Absolutely. And I think this also goes back to what we were talking about before in last month, and the seeds that get planted when we're talking about if we want to look at bitterness as a seed. So you have the situation where he has this falling out with his father over financial matters and decides, refuses to speak to him. So you have this seed that grows that started with the falling out. And then he starts to get closed off. And then as you see that seed grow, the roots expand. So now we got the impact of his marriage. So somehow, by being bitter with his dad, falling out over his dad, it closed him off emotionally to him, but then it also started to spread to his marriage and to his friendships. So we think that this is an isolated. Sometimes we'll think that this thing that happened is a isolated incident, and we could just be mad. I'm gonna just be mad at my auntie just because she did something I didn't like, and I'm gonna just be mad at her. But there may be other people that do similar things, or things that remind you of the things that she does, or somehow it just affects how you deal with other people. but you think it's just only dealing with your auntie, or in this situation, James may have thought just cutting his father off was just going to affect that relationship, or maybe he even think it would affect that relationship at all, or didn't care about that. But that seed, as the roots grow, it just spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and affects other areas of his life. And just like we talked about before, if you have an oak tree, oak trees have big roots. And if you have an oak tree that's planted, a seed gets planted next to your driveway, eventually those roots are going to crack your driveway. And eventually, if you're on a slab, them roots are going to affect your foundation. That foundation cracks, your plumbing cracks, water gets in, all these type of things happen. And so sometimes, well, we won't get to that, but by him opening the door, by him getting the seed planted, refusing to speak to his father, those roots grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and it impacted his marriage, and it impacted his friendships. And then, like Pastor Ross said, it even led to chronic health issues. And so I think, again, as a reminder, these things aren't just an isolated situation. They don't just affect that one thing. They have the ability to affect a whole lot of areas of your life. And if we don't let that bitterness go, if we don't move on from that, if we don't forgive, or whatever the case may be, it has long term impacts, and it affects more than just that relationship with that particular person. Any other ideas? Any other thoughts on how bitterness impacted James's life? Okay. Well, the second question: how could reconciliation or forgiveness improve his mental health? And this could be your thoughts. This could be something based on what we talked about already, um, but no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, you had some things that, they fell out over money and
Mm-hmm.
some kind of financial matters. And it seems like, you know, they had a relationship before the money issue. And so it seems like, hey, if we can get past this, we can just put some boundaries in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And so, whatever we did, whether it was going into business together or borrowing money or whatever, maybe we can stay away from that, to avoid kind of going down the same road again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but get past. And so I think there probably could have been some solutions involved in it, because it seems that they had a relationship before that, and the fact that they were parent and child, son and dad. It seems like, sometimes I don't think all relationships are meant to to repair. Um, but with a parent, somebody that, all right, baby, somebody that close, you know, I think it doesn't hurt to repair the relationship. You just learn from the mistakes that were made and say, you know what, we might have to put some boundaries, in our relationship, but the relationship is probably too important just to cut off. And I think just by communicating again, it probably would have began to heal some of the stressful things that he was dealing with from now being cut off from somebody he's been a part of his entire life.
I agree. I agree. Any other thoughts? Yeah, and I think that's kind of like the summation of this idea. Is like, hey, when you're walking around with unforgiveness, when you're walking around bitter, when you're unable to reconcile with people, or forgive people, there are things that happen: stress, anxiety, high blood pressure, just become angry, become grumpy, become bitter. And I think we owe it to ourselves to do what we need to do to move in that situation. And like Pastor Ross was saying, money matters. Things happen and people feel a certain way. Money always gets can always make people act funny. But without this idea of feeling better through reconciliation, uh, James is kind of, again, strained his relationship with his father, but impacted his marriage and his friendship. So it would behoove him to move in the space of reconciliation and forgiveness.
Yeah, and there's
All
some
right, we can.
things, like when I think of money, hey, we could be out now. Now, if something happened between my dad and my wife, now that we might not be able to put boundaries, or we might have to go ahead and just forget that relationship. But
Yeah.
But money, money. I think there's certain things that you can say. I think we can find a get around in this right here.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think it goes back to what we were saying before about like the people, like James probably has had whatever issue related to the bitterness that resulted from this financial matter in him for a while. And it might have been in other areas, and he might have got closed off and refused to speak to other people. And so he has a habit of, like Kier was saying, this crazy cycle of responding to whatever the situation was in a way that would lead him to refuse to speak to his father. So it probably, we don't have it here in this scenario, but if we can imagine that probably happened with his wife, his friendships. He probably found other ways to be bitter with people and refuse to speak to them, and then now he's just, on this island because he has this habit of becoming bitter over situations and not forgiving and not reconciling and all that type of stuff. So it just goes on, and the cycle continues and continues and continues. All right, we can jump into the next slide. So last time, because we were having to leave, I gave you a homework assignment. And basically, you may or may not have done it. We won't spend a lot of time here. But what I wanted you all to think about was a time when you held on to resentment. How did it impact your mood, your relationships, or stress levels? And I wanted you to spend some time kind of journaling on that and kind of reflecting on that. And then also in present tense, write down one grudge you're holding on to and create a personal plan to work through it. Now we can spend a few minutes here. I don't know if anybody cares to share. I kind of spoke on it a little bit with my situation with the record label. But it doesn't have to be super deep. It doesn't have to be something you don't want, people to hear on the internet or on Zoom later if they watch again. But if anybody wanted to share maybe some of their thoughts from their journaling, otherwise, I'll give a minute or two just for people to maybe think about grudges that they're holding on to now, so they can create a personal plan to work through it. But like I said, I'll give a moment or two um, to think about a time. If you want to share, you can share. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think more highly of myself than I should, but I don't really see myself. I do a real good job of cutting people off and just kind of moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and maybe I might be lying to myself, but I don't really see myself as a person that holds on to it. Um, but but I think I can. What that is? Let's see. Huh? Hold on for a
Maybe
second.
Famian hot.
Okay,
Famian hot.
but I think that I can I can think of a time to where I don't know. I think maybe I think more highly of myself than I should because I really don't think I hold on to stuff. Um, I think I just kind of cut off. Maybe that might be the unhealthy piece, just cutting off and just moving on. Maybe I don't know if that's good, but I don't know. There was a person actually here at this church that I knew I needed to remove that had a position in the church, and so and I actually preached a sermon called "Better and Not Bitter." That was the name of my sermon, "Better and Not Bitter." And after service, I already had a letter ready, telling that person that the services were no longer needed. And so I remember giving that person that termination letter, and that person was like, "You just preached a sermon, better and not bitter." And now I say, "But I'm not bitter. This I'm not bitter at all. This is something I need to do. Oh, and I wish the best for you. I just can't work with you no more." And
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know if I just hide it or what, but I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I can't really remember something to where I kind of held on to stuff and was bitter, but I'm sure it probably was.
Yeah. Well, and some people are built like that. Like I feel like in my own experience in life, everybody handles situations according to their temperament, right? And sometimes it's good or bad. And so the ability to cut off and move on is a skill set for some, and it's a deficit for others. Some people hold on to relationships longer than they should because they feel obligated, or it's a family member, or whatever the case may be, and it just leads to poor mental health, poor physical health, poor spiritual health, right? And so I think that that may be a gift that you have. Like people ask me all the time about my job, like, "Hey, how do you hear all these stories about people and this and that other thing, and then and don't I'm like, man, hey, I do my job, I sit with the people, I hold space for the people, and I go home. And I got my own stuff to worry about, I got my own life to consider, I got, and I'm not, hey, I hope you make it to the next session, and I'm praying for you, and I'm gonna give you all the advice in the game and the things I can give you in that session. But I got stuff going on in my own, my own life. And so I don't have the space to hold on to everybody's drama and trauma and problems that I meet with. And so I feel like God has gifted me in that space, because a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people hear stories and it wears on them. They hold on to it. It affects their everyday life. They can't sleep. They can't think. All these type of things. So I think there can be a space for someone to be able to let go and move on. But I think if it shows up in other areas of your life, if I mean, you probably know if it's impacting your life. For me, when I am feeling a certain way about something that's going on in my house or my life or whatever, I find myself sleeping and my shoulders are tense. And I wake up in the middle of the night with my shoulders around my ears, and I'm trying to figure out, oh, what's going on, is because I'm holding some type of something in my body, and it manifests at night by me getting tense around my neck and shoulders. And so I know I got to figure out what this thing is. If it's issues with my wife, is it work, is it kids, is it life, is it whatever? Because for me, things that could lead to bitterness, or things that make me angry, or things that could lead to unforgiveness, they tend to manifest themselves through tense shoulders when I'm sleeping. And so I'll just find myself again, wake up in the middle of the night, like, why are my arms up? What is going on? And I have to intentionally release my arms, release my shoulders, release my neck. And then I have to then process and figure out what's going on. And so, it may be all right. It may not be nothing happening with you, so it's not a big deal. But at least you're cognizant of it and able to, um, I guess, process it if it comes up. I'm here to help. We can have conversation about it. All right. Anybody else on that? Anybody want to share? No pressure. Now we can move on.
I've had times before where um I guess I was in situations where um I know I don't know how much details to give, but I feel like I've been in situations where
Tell the
I
truth, shame the devil. Shame that devil.
shame the devil. Okay, in a
No, I'm just
previous
kidding. Go ahead.
okay, in a previous
Yes, no.
religious institution that I was at, I feel
Uh,
like there were things that I felt like were kind of detrimental to the health of some congregants. And I felt like I brought it and to the leadership, and then those things like kind of like were still happening. And at the end of the day, I was like, I don't know if I can be happy being here or not. So I eventually kind of left that place. But later on, God kind of showed me through dreams that I was holding on to resentment and that I needed to forgive and that I actually needed to ask for forgiveness myself. And again, this has been in my own healing journey because I have like a psoriasis, which is like this inflammatory thing that is probably related to stress. It is also related to stress. So I feel like God was just kind of showing me not little things that I didn't think were big. Like I don't think about this person every day. Like I don't, but he's like, yeah, this is something that needs to be addressed. And so, um, at first I was very scared to address it. I guess in addressing it, it was like actually like, hey, I've been holding this thing against you, and will you forgive me for this? Was kind of the gist of it. Which again can be weird, awkward, whatever. But once I sent the message, did the things, I had so much joy and I felt relief and just like freedom. And so I do think sometimes, well, at least for me, I realized I might just move on and be like, all right, well, I'm gonna just move on. But I may like, you know, not have maybe completely forgiven or let go. And I don't actually realize it because again, it's not somebody that affects my life on a regular basis. But I've had like maybe a few situations like that where God has shown me like, hey, you're holding on to some unforgiveness and it's leaving a root of bitterness. And you need to like repent to that person for like not forgiving them and being bitter. And then you need to move on. That's going to give you freedom. And so that has helped me a lot.
Amen, sister. Amen. All right. But no, I think that's the reality, right? So if sometimes, like Pastor Ross was saying, it might involve cutting someone off, but it might involve leaving an institution. I mean, it might involve leaving a church. If you've expressed to leadership, like, hey, this thing is a thing, I don't think it's a right. da 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 da, blah blah blah. You lay it all out, and if it's factual for your mental health, for your physical health, for your spiritual growth and development, you might need to go, or you might need to stay based on what the Lord is saying. The Lord might have you in that place to help guide, lead, advise, just speak up in situations where maybe leadership or whoever the situation is, congregants or whatever, aren't moving in a direction that is healthy or spiritually beneficial or righteous or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, staying for the wrong reasons is wrong. Leaving for the wrong reasons is wrong. But you want to make sure that you're in balance. And if you do decide to stay in a space that in a place that you feel is maybe things aren't going as they should, you got to do the work to make sure that you're not there, being a spoiled, a rotten apple spoiling a bunch, or you're not rocking the apple cart unjustly, or you're not just there to undermine what's going on. But you really need to do the work and ask God to help you be in that space. And sometimes I know for me, I've given up too prematurely on a lot of different things because I was like, they're not hearing me, or this is crazy, or whatever, because it rubbed me the wrong way, or I felt something about the situation, and maybe I should have stayed there a little longer, I should have fought a little harder, or whatever the case may be. But you always want to protect yourself against unforgiveness, against bitterness, and all these different things. And I think, with that example that was given, hey, is it time to go? Is it time to stay? Lord, what do I do? I've addressed the issue. Nothing changed. It's not my fault. It's not my issue. There's a lot of things that can come from that. But I think the biggest thing is making sure that if you're going to stay, don't be bitter. And if you're going to go, let it go. Any more questions, comments, concerns on that? Okay. I may need a few more minutes. I think these are the last two slides, but I wanted to, maybe we don't necessarily have to do this, but I wanted to do like a little role play if we had any two people that were willing to do the role play. We don't have to. If nobody wants to do it, we can kind of move on to the next thing. But I wanted to just, based on what we've done, not that y'all are trained professionals or even have to be, discernment also works. And just having the Spirit of God dwelling in you can maybe help with this situation. But just wanted to see if anybody wanted to be a person struggling with bitterness, maybe give a 1 minute scenario or spiel on why you're bitter, and it could be completely fictitious. That's fine. And then the other person plays a supportive friend or a therapist, and then we just kind of see, how that interaction goes back and forth, maybe for a few minutes. But like I said, if nobody wants to role play, we can move on to the next thing. I just thought that might be something exciting to have.
I'm fine doing it.
Okay, okay. You want to be the struggling person, or the supportive friend or therapist?
Um, I'll be a struggling person.
Okay. Do we have a therapist in the house? Do we have a supportive friend or daughter or son? All right, I'll be the supportive friend, sir. Now people gonna know how I work and operate. So hopefully I don't lose any clients. All right, sir. Ron, tell me, man, what's going on? I've been trying to catch it with you. We've been kind of missing each other. But we finally sitting here, catching up. What's been going on?
Well, I'm struggling. I really I like my church, um,
Mhm.
but the pastor has some things that he's involved with, like organizations, and I really think that that he doesn't see the evil in these organizations, and I've tried to share with him, how evil these organizations are, and he just doesn't seem to take me serious, and I'm just kind of frustrated.
Mm, 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 mm. What about that makes you frustrated? Like, what part of him not taking you serious frustration?
Because I mean, I clearly see the issues, but I can't get him to see it the way I see it.
Mm, mm. Have you feel like your approach has been nice and been kind of, forthcoming? Like, hey, I just some things I'm thinking about. Or have you come off and
From your
rubbed him the wrong way,
calendar,
or like what?
virtual
How do you feel your
Alachua
delivery
Central
has been?
District Church
Not saying it's
School
you, not saying
Convention
you're the
meeting
problem, but I'm just
starts
trying to
in
figure out
30
like, is there
minutes.
ways to kind of get this person to hear you?
Yeah, no, I'm very respectful.
From your
And,
calendar,
and sometimes
virtual
almost
Alachua
like
Central District Church School
kind of
Convention meeting
apprehensive about
starts in 30
approaching, make sure I
minutes.
don't come off as pushy or anything like that. But I just really feel, that God puts it on my heart to share these
Mhm.
things. but it just never seems like I'm penetrating it. So it doesn't seem like my words are being taken serious.
Mm. Well, in a situation like that, you've done what you felt like you were called to do, right? To have a conversation, to talk about the organizations, to explain all the things that you learned about these things. And if he doesn't hear you, um, and if you start to get bitter about it or feel a certain way, then we need to check your motives or check your heart at this point in time, right? Because it's like, hey, if you've done what you feel like the Lord has called you to do, you've done your job, you should be able to wash your hands and dust your feet and keep it moving. But if you can't do that, I think we need to dig a little deeper and figure out what's going on inside of you. Now, it could be righteous. It could be like, man, you're just so passionate about this thing that, this thing has to change. It needs to be different. But is there any part of you in there that's like, man, I can't believe this dude ain't listening to me. I can't believe this dude is these facts that I'm presenting, all this information that I've done, all these links that I've shared, and I can't believe he's not changing his mind or perspective. Like, is that you in that space feeling some kind of way, or is just some righteous indignation that's happening?
I'm not really sure that I'm bitter, because I
Mhm.
really do respect the person. We have a great relationship, but it just seems that I'm not being taken serious, and so
Right.
I wouldn't say that I'm bitter, but I do feel that I might not be taken as serious because I
Mhm.
really do feel passionately about what I'm
Mhm.
sharing.
Well, I think, one way to approach it is to, if you feel like you can have that conversation with your pastor and be like, hey, I just want to make sure, I'm not really feeling a certain way just yet, but I want to make sure that, hey, in my times when I've had conversations with you about the issues, about the organizations, about all the evils thereof, that you're not just dismissing me. And even if you are, okay, that's cool. Let's have a conversation. But I just want to make sure that I'm not basing my feelings towards you on assumptions, assuming that you don't take me seriously or you don't think what I'm saying is important. And I want to get some facts about the situation and figure out like what's going on. I think that might be a good conversation to have. Or, hey man, you've done your job. You said what you had to say, especially if you feel like this is the Lord is calling you to say and do. Like, how do you, and you just keep it pushing. You know what I'm saying? You keep it moving. But I think if you're going to see this person every week and feel a certain way about them, or if that can kind of, if that seed is getting planted and the roots are starting to grow, I think you might want to have that one-on-one conversation with him, and just kind of see and where his heart is, and kind of get a better understanding, so that that bitterness, doesn't set root.
Yeah, I think I'll just kind of work because I don't think it's that serious with me. I don't think it's that serious. Um, but I guess I'll pay attention to me and my emotions and how I feel, and if it seems like it's more than what I'm admitting right now, I can take next steps. But I do want to be valued.
Yeah. And that's cool. I think you have value and you have worth, sir. And if your pastor doesn't recognize that, that's his loss. But I think you're good. I think you're good. Ron, I've known you a long time, and I think you're a good guy, man. Don't let that man steal your thunder. You're good. You're good. All right, and scene. Okay, so let's talk about it, guys. How did that go? How did that feel? Any questions, comments, concerns? I see Cody had some comments in the comment section. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that situation. No, everybody's good.
I
Okay.
got a
Well, I
comment.
mean, I guess
I got a comment. I
yes,
got a
yes,
comment.
yes.
I
My
think.
bad. My bad.
Oh, you
Uh,
got some, Cody?
No, I was just looking. Just look. That's it.
I was gonna say, if I was a therapist too, I'd probably be like, I think this goes back to like God. If you really felt like God told you this, and you did your part, then there's peace there. Like God, if you really hear from God, God will tell you what to do, and then you'll have peace.
mhm,
You can't force nobody to do nothing, really. So that's not. I don't think God would ever tell you to try to force somebody to do something. So
mhm.
you can only
What if
do.
they not listening?
I mean,
The
you can
Bible says
force.
snatch some. You got to snatch some out the fire. You got to snatch them out.
Maybe. I mean, if God keeps telling you to do things repeatedly, but I don't know how you could, just follow the Lord is what I would say. Just
Okay.
whatever God is saying.
The seed was sown. That's it.
There you go. There you go. I'm saying you can't save people from the fire that like to be burnt, right? Just let them do what they do. They figure it out. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I think that was a great role play. I think that was very good, very timely. All right, okay. All right, we'll go on to the next slide, and then we'll wrap up with this. And so I wanted to address some of the things that Kiera was saying before, in terms of not letting this issue, especially with this bitterness and unforgiveness or whatever the case may be something that just kind of just leads us down a road of destruction or path of destruction, like in the scenarios, strained relationships with spouses and friends, being bitter at work, losing jobs, and crashing out, as we said before. And so I wanted to just drive home the point that the Bible views bitterness as a destructive force that can lead to anger, resentment, and strife. It can also prevent a person from having a healthy relationship with God and others. And so I just wanted to share these three scriptures with you, to kind of drive home that point, and hopefully, give us some things to think about when we're kind of wrestling or struggling with bitterness or unforgiveness. So Ephesians 4:31-32 NIV says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." Um, for me, the takeaway, as I explained before in some of the other previous mental health sessions, is that just growing up how I grew up, and growing up where I grew up in, like, Los Angeles and Oakland, um, bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, like that was the ways of the street. That was the code of the street. And if somebody did something to you, you do something back, and you turn it up 10 times more. And I think that's why we have a lot of these, young men out here in the streets killing each other, because the cycle starts. You got my cousin, I'm gonna get you. You get me, somebody gonna get you. Da 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 da. And nobody breaks that cycle with compassion, with forgiveness, with all of those type of things. And so it doesn't have to be that extreme, but I think every day there's little things that can pop up, that can add to our bitterness, that can lead to rage, that can lead to anger, that can lead to brawling, and slandering, and forms of malice. And so the Bible is really consistent with the message of forgiveness. And one, because it's good to forgive for our own mental health and physical health, and spiritual health, but also because if we don't forgive, God can't forgive us. So it's important to move in that direction. Hebrews 12:14-15. Verse 14, "Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many." I think that was pretty straightforward. And I think it's very, as we looked at even that scenario with James, I think it was in that scenario, did he make any efforts to live in peace with his father after they had the financial situation? And we see that because he didn't make any effort to live at peace with his father, it led to a strained relationship with him. It led to a strained relationship with his spouse, and it also destroyed relationships that he had with his friends. And so living in peace sometimes maybe, like Pastor Rawls was saying, hey, I got to cut you off, so that we don't continue to have conflict or whatever the case may be. But then sometimes it involves a concerted effort to make up with that person. And again, some people don't want it. Some people are like, hey man, let's get this thing right. Let's this thing, let's figure out how to not be in this space. And they may not want to move forward with you. And you have to be okay with that. But you did your part to live in peace, and you continue to live in peace, even if that other person maybe doesn't want to drop the hatchet, so to speak. And then lastly, we have Matthew 6:14-15. Verse 14 says, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you." And verse 15 says, "But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins." And I think that's, again, pretty self-explanatory. I don't think any of us want to be in a situation or be in a place where, because of bitterness, because of unforgiveness, God can't forgive us. And we need to have grace every day for other people, live peaceably with all people, get rid of bitterness, anger, and rage. And that's kind of where those scriptures are. Any comments, questions, concerns about those scriptures, or how faith can aid in letting go of resentment, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things I see is just really try to avoid isolation.
Mm.
When you start feeling those feelings, you know, try to connect with a community or at least a person that can encourage you in the Word of God. Um, and it might not always encourage you in the Word of God, but you gotta add that piece in there too. But the isolation seems to be the isolation and the lack of word seems to be the two dangerous places to go.
Mhm. I agree. And I think isolation is a common thread in a lot of things that we've talked about over the time that I've been um, heading up the mental health ministry. It's like, yo, like when you're on that island and you're hearing those thoughts over and over again with no way to check and balance, when you're not checking in with people, when you're not connecting with the Lord, your own thoughts, as we saw earlier and we talked about earlier, can lead you down a road that's very destructive. And when you don't have those checks and balances in place and that social support, man, we can come up with some crazy things that don't even have nothing to do or really happen, but because that's the way we interpreted it or that's the lens in which we saw things, it just leaves us in a bitter place, in a bitter space. So I concur with that. Like we cannot live in isolation, and we definitely have to do this walk with Christ with other people. And I think that's kind of the last thing on there: the role of prayer, community, and scripture and healing. Like we need community, definitely need prayer, and we definitely need to study our word to understand how we can fight against bitterness. And that's pretty much it. Anybody, everybody, any final comments, any final thoughts, any suggestions, anything? All right, Kiera, you let me down. I thought you was gonna bring it home. I was ready for you. I was waiting, but it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Well, I thank y'all for this time. I think it's been a good talk. I feel like again, even preparing for this, for these last 2 months, I think was wonderful for me in my own personal walk. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this time. I think somebody's mic just came out. I don't know if they were going to say something.
Yeah,
Okay.
Cody.
Well, thank.
Cody said that you said I let you down. Sorry, I got a little distracted
No,
about
no, no. I
look.
was waiting for you to. I was waiting for you to bring it home. I thought you were gonna have that final word. I was ready for it.
Look, I'm so sorry I ain't got it. I'm around here pureeing food and feeding Kai and so excited about making little baby food for him.
Okay. Well, I won't hold it against you. I'm not bitter about it at all. There would be no seeds planted. I'm good. We're good. All right. Well, that's it for me, sir. That's all I got.
All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us for our mental health ministry conversation for this month, and make sure you share it so that others can. I think it's some real good stuff. Bitterness is a rough place to be in, to find yourself in. It can lead to some things that can really cause you as a person to break down spiritually and emotionally and physically. So share the post. Um, you've been equipped with the ability to have some conversation with people that might be struggling with bitterness, and so go do the work that God is equipping you to do. And so, got a lot of things going on this weekend, so make sure you pay attention to the calendar. We'll be out preaching on 39th Avenue at the Female Protective Society at 7 o'clock on Friday. Got a lot of activities on Saturday, food giveaway on Saturday. Then we'll be celebrating the resurrection on Sunday. So have a great week and look forward to celebrating the worship, um, celebrating the
Is that
resurrection. Kira,
somebody's hand up or
yeah, it looks like
okay?
Kira. Is
Yeah,
that your hand?
it might be the
Maybe,
puree
maybe
got it.
not.
Somebody's hand
Okay,
is
okay. All right. So you all have a great week, and hopefully we see you tomorrow at Real Talk Bible Study. Again, if you have a topic, send it to me. I don't have a topic right now. Have a great one.